Hi, my name is Manisha Sini, and I'm going to go over the questions for Lab 10. So the first one basically asks you for the difference between an exception and an error. So I wrote that an exception cannot be handled by the programmer, but an exception can. The next one wanted you to create examples for a type, key, and value error. So for a type error, I wrote x is equal to 12, y is equal to 12, but as a string, and I printed their sum. This gives you a type error because obviously you can't add an integer to a string. You would fix this by either changing the string to an integer, or you could print them both by doing print x comma y as opposed to an operation like x plus y. For the next one, for the key error, I created a dictionary of names, and so I had Maisha to Zinni, John to Smith, and then Jane to Doe, and I indexed the name Joe. And obviously this doesn't work because Joe doesn't exist in this dictionary. So to fix this, you would either just index the key that actually does exist, or you would add this key to the dictionary by doing names bracket Joe is equal to whatever Biden. And this way, like, you wouldn't get an error. So for the value error, I did float, and then in the parentheses, the word 12. And basically the problem with this is that, you can't input a string into this. You would have to use like, a float or an integer. So for my cast try finally, I wanted to find the square root of a negative number. So I used the math square root function. So I imported the math package and I let x be negative 100. So first I tried to do math dot square root of x. And because this function requires a positive number in the input, you would get a value error. So I would do except value error, print a negative number does not have a real square root. And finally, I would print x to the 0.5 power, which is basically the square root of x, is a square root as a complex number, because this operation right here does find the square root and it would give you a complex number, even if the first one right here doesn't. So when I run this, I get a negative number does not have a real square root because obviously this line didn't work out, so you go to this line. And then the finally line prints as this is a square root of a complex number. These are helpful because in the situation where a programmer makes a mistake in inputting data, the code still runs one way or another, right? So here I let x be a negative number and therefore this line didn't run, but these two lines ran, and the finally line is always going to run regardless. So for the next question, it gives you all of this and it asks you for an error. So this gives you an index error because the pop function removes items from the list. And so since there are 4 items from the list, the pop function would only go through 4 times before the list is completely empty. So these last 2 are unnecessary because after this point, there's nothing else in the list. So you would fix that by removing these last 2. And after this runs, there's nothing else in the list. Or if you still want to keep something in the list, you would stop here. And this would leave the number 1. The next question asks, like, what do we personally make mistakes in? And I make mistakes in not indenting, not putting colons where they belong, and using the wrong type of brackets. And I guess the best way to fix is just to like research whatever I do before like I write it down, like, write out the code, and just to like, make sure I get all the nitty-gritty details down. And for the last one, it asks you for the error, and when you run it, you get that there's an indent error. So there should be an indentation here, an indentation here. So the right one would be this, just indent. And that's it. Thank you.